Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. So Tarpley.net, you can see that 5-point program. What we've just gone through, this litany of dismal statistics, indicates the existence of a world economic depression of unprecedented proportions. The Bush bailout, as modified by Paulson, to attempt to first talk about buying up toxic derivatives. It's impossible, too many of them, 1.5 quadrillion, not enough money in the federal budget for 1.5 quadrillion of derivatives. But then the shift of policy later in 2008 in the fall, Paulson said, no, we can't do that. What we've got to do is hide the toxic derivatives, and we'll just try to pump some money into these banks. And then on top of that, that's the monetarist side of it. The other side, then the Obama stimulus with the Malthusian stuff predominating, the so-called green jobs. Well, the green jobs are something you don't want. The more green jobs you have, the poorer you are, because they've all got to be subsidized. So that's going to bust your resources that way, and you get precious little for it. The stock market has now been declining for quite a while, for 4, 5, 6 weeks, and I think we've got the worst record in the stock market now since 2004. If the Dow continues to go down today, it's the worst since 2004. So the worst since 2004, the lowest since 2003, the worst since 1984. You get the idea. Things are looking bad. Now, in the middle of it all, of course, this is the second wave of the world economic depression. In the old days, it started in 1929 in New York. Then it went on to Austria, Germany, Eastern Europe, England in the summer of 1931. And then it came back to the U.S. in the form of the general U.S. banking panic of 32 into 33 until Franklin D. Roosevelt came on the scene and began to turn the corner. What we got this time is, of course, the panic in 2008. But as of last year, certainly by May, you were in the midst of a European banking crisis, and now we're still in that. And it's also shifting also back into the United States. Now, the other side of the coin, and we'll get to the U.S. budget, the debt ceiling, in just a minute. The other side of the coin is the bankruptcy of the weaker members of the euro. And remember, this is purely artificial. First of all, it is caused by credit default swaps. Credit default swaps, derivative speculation are the reason that there's an attack on Greek bonds and Irish bonds and Portuguese bonds and Spanish bonds. The only way you can maintain stability is to take powerful steps to restrain speculation, to bridle them, to shut them down, to put them out of business. We'll get to them in a minute. So the way forward is that looks like the jackals, the hyenas, right, the people from the idea dinner at Moness, Crespi, and Hart that we reported on last year, they're now focusing on Greece because they say Greece is now near insolvency. They got $150 billion last year, and as of today, there's this meeting between the Greek government of the infamous Papandreou, the agent of the International Monetary Fund, the stooge of Wall Street, Papandreou, who's still in power, socialist, Second International Prime Minister of Greece. He's offering more austerity, so they're having a meeting, and as of this afternoon, the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the IMF, right, the three furies, I guess, of finance capital, have decided, these vultures have descended on Greece, and they say that they're going to finally advance $5 billion. That's a funny story because the $5 billion was part of the previous aid package, but the International Monetary Fund, without Dominique Strauss-Kahn now, since he's out, the IMF got tough and said, we won't give you your $5 billion because your austerity measures are not genocidal enough, you Greeks. So now they said, no, they're going to relent. They will give the $5 billion because otherwise Greece would go bankrupt, I guess, in July. We have to remember, austerity does not work, cannot work. In a depression, you cut the Greek government budget, you make the deficit bigger, worse. in the successive fiscal year. You're making things worse. Again, examples from Brüning in Germany to Schwarzenegger in California. It simply does not work. And the problem, of course, is all of those general strikes, 8 to 10 general strikes, and Papandreou is still in power. Down with Papandreou. Get him out of there. You've got to unclog this situation. And, of course, the policy recommendation for Greece, debt moratorium now. Unilateral, tough. Cease payment on all international financial debt, interest, principal, debt service, everything else. Nix. No more. No payments. Mexico did it. Argentina did it. Brazil did it with varying results. Argentina, very good model. Study President Nestor Kirchner of Argentina. You get an idea how you can use the debt moratorium to cut your foreign debt in half. In half. Why not do it? I mean, there are some bumps along the way, but it's better than this continuous decline and continuous strangulation of the great Greek people by these international finance hyenas. So therefore, you've got to do that. Now, some Greece is a small country. Yeah, look at Costa Rica. They've done it. Iceland is more or less doing it. Countries that are much smaller than Greece are also doing it. And why don't you create a debtors club, right? Since they call it Club Med, right? All right, fine, the European Club Med. Let's have a debtors club. Let's have a club of the outsiders, right? The wretched of the earth, if you will, but of course they're not. The Greeks, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Irish, maybe the Italians can join, right? There might be some Easterners, right, in the Baltics might want to join. A debtors club, because, of course, the creditors are organized in the Club of London and the Club of Paris. You need a debtors club to say, you're organized, guess what, we're organized too. You're the syndicate, we have a syndicate. You're a cartel, we have a cartel. And our policy is, we can't pay, so cut those debts and wipe out all the derivatives. That's got to be the key demand. This is different from what you had in the 1980s when you had the Mexican and then later the Brazilian debt moratoria. So people in Greece, you got to start studying Latin America in particular, but also other countries. I remember meeting in Rome some decades back, with Colonel Taki Menson of Ghana, who said he had been the information minister in a government in Ghana that had tried to do a debt moratorium, and the U.S. immediately undercut them. He was the Ghana ambassador in Rome. So this is the idea. You got to look at the experience of the world in terms of not paying, and you can't pay because paying is a physical impossibility. It can't be done. It doesn't matter what genocidal austerity measures you implement. It cannot be done, and more loans cannot be the answer. Another $40 billion just makes things worse. You've essentially got to say those debts are a mass of fictitious capital. They are illegitimate. They are not real. There was never anything productive to do with them, and they've all been exacerbated by these despicable credit default swaps. So take that, Monsieur Juncker of Luxembourg, put that in your pipe and smoke it, right? Break off the talks. We'll talk to you next week, maybe, and we'll tell you whether we're going to pay 40% or 30% of this debt, and see how low you can go, and maybe have the Portuguese and the Spanish in a race to see who can get this down. So this is the kind of situation, right? It goes from these southern European countries now also to the United States, and we'll come back to the United States to look into that other prong here in just a minute. But the entire system certainly is now on the brink. Back in a minute.